Well, hello from New York City, where it was a balmy 60 degrees at 5 a.m. this morning when I took my dog out. That'd be about 15 and a half degrees Celsius. My name is Robert Schoenfeld. I am a retired consulting curator and advisor in certain areas of American and European fine and decorative arts, not to put too fine a point on it right now. And in recent years, I've had the great pleasure and privilege of being a guest, a speaker with Viking Ocean Cruises, where I present talks just like this one I'm going to share with you today. And in fact, I'll be presenting this one once again, hopefully, if all goes well, on the May 28th sailing of the Viking Mars on the trade routes of the Middle Ages itinerary. So that's enough about me. Let's get started. The title of this talk is Best of Paris. I should say this. If we decided to go through the bests of a city that is nearly entirely bests, we'd be here till Thanksgiving. And then we would only have scratched the surface. So I have taken the prerogative, since I actually am one, of curating a small personal selection of Paris bests that will give you some idea of the artistic and cultural wonders that this city has to offer. We only have 40 or 45 minutes here, and so I've chosen to do it this way, and I hope you enjoy it. We're looking here in this first slide at the Ayampe Pyramid, the entrance to the Louvre Museum, which is probably the most brilliant architectural addition to any city that one could imagine. How audacious to be asked to make the attempt to create a new piece of architecture in the heart of Paris, but Pei succeeded. And not only did he do so, but to me, to my eye, it has a certain reference to the Eiffel Tower in that its location is so central and it plays such an important role in the city's cultural life. However, Mr. Pei, who, by the way, used to live in my neighborhood right here, I enjoyed saying hello to him and his wife from time to time, He succeeded in doing this in an unassuming way, which is yet and still very, very impressive. And so we start with this as the first best of Paris. The original title for this talk was Paris 10 out of 10, meaning everything I showed you would be 10 points out of 10. But I have decided to start with an 11. The heart-stoppingly beautiful Audrey Hepburn in the 1956 film Funny Face, playing opposite Fred Astaire as the American photographer Richard Avedon, and performing in front of the Victoire de Saint-Montrosse there at the head of the grand staircase in the Louvre. And so while Audrey was an 11 out of 10, we'll begin now with the 10s, and the first of those is quite logically the Nike, the victory figure from Saint-Montrosse, which was excavated, I believe, in 1856, and is recognized until today as the greatest known example of Hellenistic sculpture. And we'll discuss in a second exactly what that means. But first, I wanted to show it to you in its pre-restoration state. It takes a lot of nerve and hands very steady to dare to restore such an important and famous work of art. But in this case, the job was undertaken by the conservators at the Louvre with these very marvelous results. Unlike, you'll come across researching this sort of thing, references to the restoration of the Elgin marbles at the British Museum in the 1930s, where metal tools were used to pick away at the marble, and the results were not they were not as fabulous, let's put it that way. So there you see it in its restored state. When the sculpture was excavated, so too was found the hand nearby, and it is also displayed nearby when you visit the sculpture on your way up the stairs at the Louvre. So you see there the difference between the restoration and as it had become in recent years. The sculpture is made of what's called Parian marble from the island of Paros, and it is special because of its translucent qualities. It's said that when you have just exactly the right piece, light will penetrate it to a depth of nearly 12 inches. And that gives it a kind of translucence that makes it especially appealing. 1939, the Nike was taken down the grand staircase for obvious reasons and was taken off to a chateau to have a vacation during World War II. This is a chateau that is in the Estampes and Talleyrand families, and it is where the Victoire de Saint-Montrosse lived during the war, along with the Venus de Milo, another of the most famous sculptures both in Paris and in the world. This is also a Hellenistic sculpture with a date of approximately 130 to 100 BC. The Hellenistic period is roughly from the end of the Alexandrian Empire with his death in 323 until one of his sons took over from Egypt the mainland of Greece, and that became a part of the greater empire under one of his sons. So that's the Hellenistic period. Here you see a proposed restoration of the Venus de Milo, which fortunately was never carried out. It was a nice imagination on the part of a restorer somewhere, but was not meant to be. By the same token, here is the Medici Venus, which lived briefly in Paris as a best when Napoleon liberated it from Italy. And there is the Venus de Milo on the right. After 1815, the Medici Venus was returned to Italy, and the French took the opportunity to issue a little propaganda saying, well, we've acquired this other Venus and it's more beautiful, so we don't need the Medici Venus anymore anyhow. Here you see once again the Victoire, just to take one last look at what's considered the greatest of all Hellenistic sculptures that we know of. There are people who would like it to have been let me just go back and show you the Venus de Milo again. They would like these sculptures to have been by Praxiteles, the most famous of the Greek sculptors, but then everyone wants their Greek sculpture to be by Praxiteles. Is not believed to be the case here, but rather either from a sculpture from the island of Rhodes or someone even more local than that, indicating that this sort of talent was not housed strictly in a small number of people, but was more widespread than that. Here is another Paris best that was only a Paris best, try saying that 10 times, only a Paris best briefly, as it too was, shall we say, borrowed from Italy, in this case from the Vatican, and was returned after Napoleon was exiled. This one is called the Laocoon, and it depicts a Trojan priest who tried to warn the city about the horse, and this angered Athena, who then sent snakes to kill him and eat him along with his two sons. And so there you see them in this classic Hellenistic pose of pathos, which is so typical of figural sculpture in the Hellenistic period. We're going to move on now to, we're going to go roughly, let's see, 1700 years into the future to look at these two sculptures by Michelangelo, who has brought this notion of pathos from the Hellenistic era all the way forward into the humanist point of view of the Renaissance. And these are two of his so-called slaves. They were originally called prisoners, which is perhaps more appropriate. We'll see a little more about that in a second. This particular pair, when Michelangelo went to Rome, he loaned them to a prominent Florentine family named Strozzi. You may have visited the Strozzi Palace in Florence. And as far as banker Strozzi was concerned, when they were loaned to him, they were his. And so he considered them to be that way. And when he was invited by the Medici to get out of town or surrender his life, he did so along with these two sculptures, which wound up eventually in the hands of Cardinal Richelieu and eventually the Louvre. And so the provenance of these, insofar as they are legitimately in France and not something that might have been returned, is somewhat stronger than other objects, such as the Laocoon, which did get returned. I should say before we move on that I'm very fortunate. The one on the left, I had a very good friend who was a star pupil at the Academy in Rome, and this is where they were taught to study drawing from plaster casts of great sculpture. And my friend, who was a star pupil, came into possession, shall we say, of one of these plaster casts, which he gave me as a college graduation present. And so as I look over the top of my laptop here in New York City, I can see it sitting in the corner of my living room. And so that's part of our collection here. We're talking about prisoners rather than slaves, and you can see in the installation of the rest of the known prisoners in the Accademia in Florence, some of them have yet to fully escape from the stone, and so this conforms to the sculptor's idea that what he does is simply take away what isn't necessary, and in so doing free the sculpture from its stone. See where we are. There you see the Laocoon of the Hellenistic, the Greek Hellenistic period, together with the prisoners. Let me add before moving on that the Laocoon was discovered in a vineyard in the neighborhood of Santa Marta in Rome in 1506, I believe it was. I could be wrong by a few years. But word was sent to Pope Julius that something good was coming out of the ground. And so the Pope sent over his advisor, whose name was Michelangelo, who took along the Pope's architect Sansovino with him to take a look. And they got back to the Pope and said, oh, yeah, this is something you're going to want. And so the fellow who owned the vineyard was treated to all sorts of emoluments, while the Pope enjoyed then the custody of the first of several versions of this sculpture, all of which are Roman copies of a lost Greek original. So it would be impossible to discuss Paris bests without talking about this Italian painting by Leonardo da Vinci, which was made in approximately 1503, and it is called the Mona Lisa. It's also called the Gioconda, and the name, if there are some of you out there talking to the screen right now, the name of the lady was Lisa Gherardini. This is the Gherardini family. Gioconda is a word in Italian which means a person of good humor. And Mona Lisa is simply a sort of nickname. Mona is a contraction for the word Madonna, And so you have here Madonna Lisa Gherardini. And so when we say Mona Lisa, Mona is not her first name, but I have to admit I can't resist referring to her as Mona, so I will probably do that without thinking about it in the next few minutes. This is a vintage photograph of the way Mona was, you see, there I go, of the way Mona was installed. And here is a picture of the way she is installed today, but let me, with all of the various protective equipment, but let me caution you that beyond the protective equipment, you're going to have a little trouble getting a good look at Mona, because she is one of those rare destination paintings in this world that attract crowds for the purpose you see in the slide, which is to capture themselves with Mona. However, be advised that Mona also can reverse this on you, and she may take a selfie with the crowd and you in the crowd. But overall, I have to say that Mona does find this all pretty funny. So let me suggest to you, while we watch Mona laugh at all the people trying to get a selfie with her, that there are other ways to visit the Louvre, even in a short visit, and enjoy very, very rewarding pictures without any crowd at all. So that when you go up the grand staircase and you turn right and go down the corridor toward the room that holds the Mona Lisa, you are going to pass on the way no fewer than 3 other paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, all of them masterpieces, all of them important paintings, all of them very rewarding to your study. This one is the Virgin of the Rocks. And what I want to point out to you about it is the extraordinary collection of gestures that Leonardo has gathered into this painting, giving the composition a rhythm that's delightful and unexpected, and is also referential to at least one important thing, and that is the gesture of pointing upward. Where? To heaven, to the sky, to the place where good things are. And so in this picture, which may have been Leonardo's last, or one of his last, done in 1508, here you have the figure of St. John isolated against a dark background with the very explicit gesture pointing to, well, pointing up to whatever you choose to believe is up there. It could be redemption or salvation or heaven or just the pleasure of being in the air. It's all up. Up is good, bad is down. This is St. John the Baptist pointing upward in this marvelous, marvelous picture, which will reward your close study, if for no other reason than to get the best sense of Leonardo's technique of sfumato, which is this technique of building up layers of paint and glaze into a deeply translucent surface that creates the illusion of depth, sort of like the Parian marble we were talking about with the Nike a few minutes ago. And here you see that in its consummate expression. You won't find brushstrokes in these pictures, especially in Mona Lisa, but you will see in the background this shimmering effect that is the result of the technique called sfumato. So you can study this technique on your way to your selfie with Mona just by stopping to see St. John. And finally, we have the 1508 Virgin and Child with St. Anne. And here it is this fabulous unfolding, this unraveling, this unspiraling composition that gives the picture its movement and its delight, while still preserving the purely loving expression of the Virgin. So a quick look at a few of the bests, and maybe the best way to enjoy them at the Louvre, and just really a few of those. but it should, I hope, give you enough to think about before your next visit. We move on now to the Musée Rodin in Paris, which was originally a private residence and was given to Rodin as his studio and space to display his objects, his sculptures, and he used it for that purpose until his death. I show it to you because I've chosen it as a wonderful, wonderful visit. You see there a vintage photo of the rear of the building. It is a wonderful visit that is pretty much the opposite of the crowd you saw around Mona. You will find it to be largely unattended, and you can enjoy both the space itself as well as the sculptures within at your leisure and without fear of being trampled or interfered with by other people, other visitors. Today, in the context of that museum, we are going to look at the gates of hell. This particular work was meant to serve as the gateway to the museum at the top of a staircase, and was designed to originally hold the motto from Dante, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And you were meant to walk underneath this arch, that's right, through the gates of hell, to enter the museum. So I will not speculate on the motives there. We are simply going to look at the gates, how they came into being, and a couple of the sculptures that are on it and not on it for interesting reasons. And I'll leave the rest of it to you. But the original of the gates, one of three, another in Japan and another in Philadelphia, is installed in the museum. So where did this idea come from? Here you see the gates of another church. And finally, this one is still the gates of hell, and this one is the gates, the east gates of the baptistry in Florence, which is a late Romanesque work by Ghiberti from the middle of the 15th century, showing scenes, because it is a religious site, scenes from the life of Christ in spectacular bas-relief, deep bas-relief, and gilded by a Venetian goldsmith who excelled at this sort of thing. So what is, you're beginning to see the origins that Rodin might have made use of in conceiving of his own gates of hell. Another very interesting one is this, which is St. Dominius in the city of Split on the Croatian coast. If you ever have the opportunity to visit there, this is a wonderful 7th century church that was rebuilt in the 12th century, but largely on the same plan. And if you walk around to one side of it, you will find these absolutely surprising wooden carved gates, which are the originals, and they also depict scenes from the life of Christ. And so you can see that not only did Rodin have this idea from these predecessors, but Ghiberti too, and so that there is a tradition of these carved panels with which Rodin wanted to participate. However, in the case of Rodin, he also used other figures meant to evoke the heroic spirit. Here is the Last Judgment of Michelangelo from 1536 to 41, and right smack in the middle between the upper and lower worlds is the heroic figure of Jesus, and he is someone from whom Rodin took a great deal of inspiration, as did so many others. This is, I believe, a close-up of the figure at the top, the thinker. And the question is, who is the guy? Well, one theory is it's Dante himself. The supporting evidence for that is pretty slim, but it's also intriguing. The original title for the sculpture was The Poet. So the one poet we can attach to the gates of hell is Dante, who was highly admired by Rodin. And so perhaps he did intend this to be an evocation of Dante, although contemporary sources record his body type as being something altogether different than this. Another thought is that it's Rodin himself. In my personal opinion, this is a universal figure of heroism and contemplation of the human condition. Here you see a modeling that takes a great deal more from Michelangelo than it does from any notion of what Dante's body might have looked at. Furthermore, the sculpture was meant to be seen both frontally and from below as the sort of pedimental central figure of a gateway. But first, the poet, however, it's clear that he was modeled to a very significant degree after this figure of Lorenzo de' Medici in the Medici Chapel in San Lorenzo in Florence, and who is flanked there by night and day. And as the foundry workers were preparing the original cast of the thinker, they noticed the strong resemblance to Lorenzo in San Lorenzo, and they nicknamed him the Thinker and took away his name, the Poet. And so forever after, the sculpture has been named the Thinker, which in a sense to me is a lot more appropriate as a figure of universality and contemplation, which can result in reactions that depend very much or as much on the viewer as they do on the intended effect of the figure. See that again there. And again, I point out to you, he was meant to be seen from below and also frontally. I'm showing him to you from the side here for a reason. Again, I just want to emphasize this universality that is 100% successful in this sculpture. And it was in fact so universal that it reached American popular culture in the years 1959 to 63. We all know who this is, Dobie Gillis. And when Dobie needed to seek comfort and ruminate on both the human condition and his own condition, he took refuge in the park nearby with the thinker who helped him work things out. What was he trying to work out? That's right, his relationship with Tuesday Weld. Now, I am a person of a certain age here, but I was just young enough in 1958 or 9 until 63 to understand, as Dobie did, who was a little bit older than I was, that Tuesday Weld was going to be completely and utterly inaccessible and unavailable, and was going to drive him back to his seat behind the thinker time after time. And so let's just take this short moment to say how sorry we are for Dobie and what Tuesday did to her, but we understand. There we go. So this couple apparently did not have the same problem. Here we have a sculpture by Rodin that did not make the cut. It is called The Kiss. It was originally called Francesca da Rimini, which is the name of the woman shown here in the arms of her lover, whose name was Giovanni Malatesta. The only problem is that her lover was also her husband's brother. And so she had the misfortune, after having somehow found themselves with none of their clothes on, reading Guinevere and Lancelot to each other. They had the misfortune to be discovered by Giovanni's brother Paolo, who ended both of their lives over this misdeed. And so what Rodin has done is to show this pair of star-crossed lovers in an embrace. And the story is that their lips do not actually touch. I think Rodin had something in mind when he did this, which was to create a sexual tension, which is up to the viewer to fulfill. And just in order to give ourselves a better opportunity to check in on that, I've discovered this close-up. I'm not sure how much more you can get from it, but the question of whether the lovers' lips actually kiss did not enter into its controversy, because it was simply, what's the right way to say it? It was simply too successful to be shown in the open. And so, in fact, when a second version was created for a collector in England, it was temporarily stored in the soldiers' dining room of Lewes Town Hall. And during a dinner of the soldiers, there was a certain amount of concern that the sculpture revealed would be a little bit too much for all those soldiers. And so there you see Francesca da Rimini and Giovanni Malatesta under a sheet so as not to get the soldiers too worked up. There you have it, the kiss. And we're going to add just one here. This is my +1. This picture is not in Paris, but it's about 15 kilometers, is it miles or kilometers down the road in Versailles, a very easy trip. And so I'm including it here. This is a picture of 1801 through 1805. Napoleon was so happy with it, even though he did not personally pose for it, that he ordered 5 copies of it. And even though none of those copies are in Paris, 2 of them are in Versailles, and you can see them there. Again, I want to reiterate this idea during this period of the hero. In this case, the hero is in the service of military conquest and military heroism, unlike the religious or spiritual heroism we saw earlier, or the simple courage or confidence of the classical man. Here it is in a military context, to the point that Napoleon on his white steed is meant to evoke Alexander on his much more famous white horse called Bucephalus. A very, very successful, iconic Paris best by Eugene Delacroix. And here we have, did I say I meant Jacques-Louis David? I hope that's the worst mistake I make today. This picture, the intervention of the Sabine woman of a few years earlier, 1799. You see there on the right the composition of the horse, and here I show you both of them so you get some idea of where that composition, everything comes from somewhere, folks. You get the idea of where it comes from. And one last look at the picture with a sculpture by Canova, this one from the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York, emphasizing classical heroism. One final look, and now we are going to take a look at something very different, not heroic at all. We had a patron. This is an artist named Paul Delaroche. There was a patron who met the artist in the Louvre one day and asked him to paint another picture of Napoleon crossing the Alps. It was believed that Napoleon used a mule, not a gallant white steed, to cross at the St. Bernard Pass. and it wasn't fun, and it wasn't heroic, and it wasn't beautiful. And so this picture was created after Napoleon's exile. This was created in 1850. So to see the two of them together is a very good juxtaposition of the heroic for its purpose, together with the perhaps more naturalistic for its purpose some years later. Not only does everything come from somewhere else, but everything has its time, which is why, just to go back, Rodin's thinker, his time is universal because his figure is universal, and so every time is his time. Who's the lady? I'm going to give you a couple of hints out there, and when I see you on the May 28th sailing of the Viking Mars, you can tell me if you got the answer all by yourselves. So the first hint is her name was Anna McNeil. How many of you out there right now are going, oh yeah, I know. Okay, here's the second hint. Everybody has one. So Anna McNeil was somebody's mother. Anna McNeil Whistler was Whistler's mother. And there she is. The story is that Whistler wanted to paint her standing up, but she was too old and feeble. And so the composition fell into what became one of the most famous of its kind in all of art. This picture is in the Musée d'Orsay. What's going on here is a composition in tones of gray, using black as the dominant color. And my point in showing you this next little group of things is to say that art is not linear. One thing does not happen one after the other to the exclusion of anything else. Things happen simultaneously. So back here in 1636, we have Velázquez painting the court jester, and here we have Whistler himself painted by Fantin-Latour, again in that same coloration. And yet another picture of by Manet of a female figure in the same organization and tone. Lastly, this notorious, could say famous, but it's probably more notorious than famous picture called Madame X by John Singer Sargent. This one also here in the Metropolitan Museum. Her name was Madame Gautreau. And she was, once again, what's the right way to say it, a very successful courtesan in Paris. And she employed the full measure of her charm to gain the attention of men who would support her interests and activities in Paris. Enough said about that, except one interesting detail. Her right shoulder strap of her gown there, you see, is up over her shoulder. It didn't start there. It started off the shoulder, but that was just too scandalous for the Parisians, who really didn't want to do any harm to Madame Gautreau. She wasn't considered the sort of person that would be a target of that sort. And so Sargent reluctantly, I am sure, placed the strap back on Madame Gautreau, Madame X's shoulder. And here is that group of things surrounding the Whistler of his mother. And you get a sense of all of this going on through time at the same thing as other stylistic developments, which I'm going to show you shortly. Another picture by Whistler in that same tonality, this one, a view of the Thames that's presently in the Tate. So dark shades as opposed to light shades. This is believed to be, could be the last painting by Georges Seurat, and it is painted primarily in tones of white, lighter tones, using the pointillist technique, which involves placing dots of color next to each other with the goal that the two dots will resonate with one another and create the impression of still a third color. That's pointillism, and Seurat was its principal among a number of very successful practitioners. This picture is from 1891. And so just to show you that the art world is capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time. Another look at the Seurat, and this is the wonderful Musée d'Orsay in the converted d'Orsay train station in Paris, well worth a visit on the basis of the architecture alone. Let's move on now, and when you join me on the 28th, the sailing on May 28th, we will put into this place, and I'm sure you're out there now scribbling down, this is the harbor at Le Havre, where Monet spent some time, and this picture is called, I'm sure that some of you will, many of you will recognize from your cabin balcony, this scene when you get up on that morning. It is called Impression Sunrise. That's where the word impressionism comes from. This very painting, Impression Sunrise, in the harbor of Le Havre. Just to contrast that with the Whistler, to show that things do go on simultaneously. This painting is presently housed in the Musée Marmottan, which is a family that had a quite significant holdings of Monet, to which Monet's son added his own after the artist's death. And these are presently in the house, and you can visit. It makes a wonderful visit, similar to a couple more I'm showing you, where you won't be bothered by selfie seekers. Some shots of the interior and so forth. Back to the picture, Impression Sunrise, the Le Havre harbor. This close-up, these pictures, this particular series was painted by Monet in Le Havre. Also the nearby cathedral at Rouen, his famous haystacks, all painted in series in order to convey different effects of light during the day and also at night. Monet simply could not resist the very same scene, and this one is called Harbor at Le Havre, Nighttime. There you have it. Just want to briefly show you the Tuileries, where a new installation was made not long ago of, there's the entrance today, of Monet's water lilies on its own floor in a sort of figure 8 arrangement, which conveys a kind of infinite notion of the nature of the views that Monet was trying to depict. And you can see that in this installation view quite clearly. And in this one here, unfortunately, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which has a smaller single water lily, but plenty large enough, in their renovation, put it on an immense wall all by itself, and it looked like a Band-Aid on the wall. It was as much of a failure as an installation as this one is a success. I'm glad to say that MoMA has rethought that idea. So anyway, the Tuileries, you can view the Monet water lilies there. It's like visiting a chapel of art, and you can have a contemplative experience there without the fear of interruption. Now I want to show you one of my favorite visits in New York. This here is Jeanne Lanvin, the famous French designer, and you know her best for images like this, and for logos like this, and bottles like this. But here we are going to speak of her home, which was designed and executed by Rateau, Jacques-Armand Rateau, and he created this environment for her together with all of, and I mean all, of the handmade interiors and handmade fixtures that you can see when you visit. Here you see a car, iron fixtures, all made by hand, the bathtub the same, and some details of these amazing fixtures. She was able to achieve this at a time when a merely extremely successful fashion designer could do this sort of thing. And this is always a favorite visit for my wife and for me, even if it's just to see Madame Lanvin's bathroom. And tell the truth, folks, you all wish you had that bathroom. Okay, where are we now? This is one of the couple of house visits that I want to show you. This is the Musée Nissim Camondo, which is a decorative arts museum containing loads of original 18th century furniture by the likes of Roentgen and Jacob and many of the other most famous cabinet makers of the 18th century, along with the Orloff, the very famous Orloff silver service, as well as carpets that were intended to be used in the Louvre as early as the third and fourth quarter of the 17th century. Wonderful, wonderful house visit without fear of interference from the hordes. And this one is the Musée Cognac-Jay, a couple, Madame et Monsieur, who had a very, very successful collection, which they left in the house, where you can see the things that you think of as the wonderful spirit of French painting. This is a Francois Boucher that fits that very light-hearted mold that is so delightful to all of us. And we come near the end now with the Tour d'Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower, one of the most famous structures in the world. And I pointed out at the very beginning with our title slide how successful Mr. Pei was in adding a punctuation mark to this building in a way that honors it and respects it, and also adds something to the city at the same time. So here you see a pointillist version of 1899, and here is another photo, as well as this wonderful drawing showing the height of the tower, which was approximately 1,000 feet, next to the Titanic. This is Monsieur Eiffel with his tower. If you ever have the opportunity in the city of Girona in Spain to take a Viking excursion, you will see there a horizontal red bridge of cast and wrought iron construction from the same period, also designed by Monsieur Eiffel. There you see them digging the foundation and putting up the first part of it there. I know that your eye goes up to the top there and you want it to continue, but I like this picture of just the foundation. And a commemorative postcard from the Universal Exposition in 1889, I think. And finally, not finally, but second to last, these shots showing that this tower, which is central to the very identity of Paris and what is best about Paris, is put to good use in so many ways, including its use as a beacon and a light. And now, finally, I have chosen this wonderful, wonderful photograph from 1953 by a photographer named Marc Ribot. I'm not sure whether this man is posing. You've seen other photos of guys sitting out on girders, waiting for having their lunch during construction of a skyscraper. So people did go up there and do things, but I'm not sure if this gentleman is posing or whether he's holding on for dear life. But my choice is to see this as a quintessential French pose, a quintessential Parisian pose, and a quintessential image of what is the very best of Paris. So I hope I've been successful in sharing with you a small but carefully chosen selection of what is the best about Paris, and to give you an opportunity to visit a variety of locations depending on what your motive is. And you can, whichever one you may choose, you'll nonetheless have the opportunity of experiencing something that is the best of Paris. In any event, I do hope to see you aboard the May 28th sailing of the Viking Mars, trade routes of the Middle Ages. Please come up and say hello. My most favorite thing about working with Viking, the wonderful teams there, and doing these talks on board the ships is meeting the guests and having the opportunity to speak to you. This is an opportunity I'd never have anywhere else in the world, and so I'm as grateful for it as I could possibly be. So thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation, and I will see you on board.